Hey guys, it's Dalton. So today we're going to be talking about the Ridges, which is a previously abandoned mental hospital campus in Athens, Ohio. I'm going to be covering the history of it from the beginning to the end, roughly, just a brief history. And I want to let you know that the script that I'm going to be speaking from was written a few months ago. Everything that I say in the script was fact-checked, so everything that I say is, to my knowledge, 100% true. Some of it are like personal accounts, and I'll let you know when it's something like that. If it's something that's like hearsay or something someone's claiming but couldn't be a proven fact, I'll let you know, or try to let you know. If there's something I say that you think is not true, or you've heard something else that negates something I'm saying, let me know in the comments, because I want this video to be as factual as possible, okay? It's just hard because the Ridges has a lot of documents that don't exist anymore, or were erased, or not publicly available, so there's a lot we don't know about the Ridges, and a lot of it is hearsay, you know, like someone says like, oh, this is what happened that night, but this is actually what happened that night, and you don't really know. So if there's something you've heard, let me know in the comments. I'd love to read it. I'd love to hear about it. I also want to let you know that I'm actually here at the Ridges right now filming this video, just for like the energy of it. I just want to say, if you were entertained by this video and you haven't been to the Ridges, or you haven't been to Southern Ohio, you don't live in Ohio, please don't come here expecting to tour the facilities and go through abandoned buildings, because it's not really possible. There actually is a police force here on campus monitoring the place almost at all times. Most of the buildings are renovated too, and they're not really at the same deterioration they were a few years ago, because Ohio University has actively been restoring the buildings. Also, just so you know, in my personal opinion, I kind of think it's disrespectful to come here with the intent to vandalize the property, especially with people who went through some very traumatic stuff at this place and spent a lot of their lowest years of their lives at this campus. It's really disrespectful to come here and want to destroy things or spray paint things, in my opinion. I just also, last thing, wanted to let you know that when I say the Athens Lunatic Asylum, I am talking about the Ridges. So the campus actually went through multiple name changes throughout its history, and the first name it was given was the Athens Lunatic Asylum. So when I say that, I'm talking about the Ridges. Okay, with that being said, grab your tea, like me, okay? Get a coffee, get a snack, sit down for this wonderful video. We're gonna do a little brief dive into the Ridges. The Athens Lunatic Asylum opened to patients in January of 1874 in Athens, Ohio. The building itself was designed by an architect from Cleveland, following the Kirkbride Plan for mental hospitals. The Kirkbride Plan was a plan for hospitals created by Thomas Story Kirkbride, which laid out hospitals in a bat-wing-like design, encouraging sunlight and air circulation through most rooms. This allowed wings of the hospital to be separated by the office building that was placed in the center. It was also common for Kirkbrides to be built in a Victorian style, as they were common during the 1800s. The Athens Lunatic Asylum specifically used the Kirkbride style to separate men and women in the hospital. Each side contained one gender and their own cafeteria. The asylum in Athens had room to house 572 patients, which was over double the recommendation of Kirkbride, as Kirkbride recommended that only 250 patients exist in the same space at once. This recommendation was based on the idea that less patients allowed the doctor or doctors caring for the patients to be able to have time to take personal care of the patients on top of the other duties they have to fulfill. Most Kirkbride hospitals acted as their own hives of activity. Employees were expected to live on the premises or in the direct vicinity of the hospitals. At the time of the hospital's creation, it was a common belief that working would help the patients get better, but was also deemed economical, as forcing the patients to work provided free labor. The Athens hospital specifically had a dairy farm, an orchard, greenhouses, a plant used to generate steam, and a carriage shop. The Athens Lunatic Asylum played a huge role in the hospitalization of mentally ill patients in Ohio, as the grounds for the hospital grew from 141 acres to over 1,000 acres, with 78 buildings. The campus sits on the top of a hill behind many trees and almost out of sight to the area around it. At its height, the hospital served 15 counties in southern Ohio. I also wanted to let you guys know that when the building was created, or when the plans were drawn, it was a huge honor to the people in Athens, Ohio, because they were honored to have this mental hospital in their area because they knew it would provide jobs. It would serve a lot of Southern Ohio, if not more than just Southern Ohio, because there were very few mental hospitals at the time. Because the hospital was active for such a long time and served so many patients, it was on the forefront of cutting-edge methods of treatment for patients. The asylum performed methods of treatments that are now deemed unacceptable or at least controversial. Hydrotherapy. This first one isn't necessarily deemed unacceptable anymore from what I can find. Hydrotherapy is the practice of immersing someone in water for long periods of time in order to calm them down. These baths could be with either hot or cold water. Hydrotherapy is seen by many as bad because patients used to be locked in the tub without being able to move, while a nurse or staff member would control the temperature of the water. Modern depictions of hydrotherapy in media probably exaggerate real-world uses of hydrotherapy, so they have a great effect on the general public's opinion about it, often leading viewers into believing hydrotherapy was always inhumane. It's very hard to find a current negative opinion on hydrotherapy because it's becoming popular in the public eye today. Today's version of hydrotherapy resembles more of taking a bath without being constrained. Electroconvulsive Therapy, or ECT. I want to let you know that most of this information I'm about to talk about electroconvulsive therapy was provided by Scientific American. Electroconvulsive Therapy, or ECT, was used at the Athens Lunatic Asylum by sending electrical currents through the temples of a patient in order to temporarily relieve things like depression or schizophrenia. It is seen by many people as completely inhumane because of the gruesome idea of shocking your brain. ECT's portrayal in film once again influences the general opinion of ECT. Even though film portrayal is seemingly dramatic, there is some truth to the depictions in media. Some of the horror behind ECT was that it was used as a punishment tool to manipulate people into acting a certain way. It was also used on gay patients as a way to get rid of homosexuality that was believed to be a mental health issue at the time. The sad fact of the matter is that most doctors and nurses believed what they were doing was right. It only became routine to numb patients by the early 1940s. Oddly enough, ECT is now believed to be a truly effective way to relieve a patient from different mental health issues. Today, patients are numbed so they cannot feel anything and given muscle relaxers to avoid seizures. Electroconvulsive therapy gets rid of the symptoms patients have, but it is not considered a cure because most patients will get their symptoms back if they don't go to therapy or work through the issues that are causing their symptoms. Lobotomy. Saving the most severe for last, lobotomies are completely unused today. A lobotomy is a serious procedure where connections between parts of the brain are severed. It was believed that bad connections in the brain were causing mental health issues in patients, so eliminating them would allow the patient to be free from those mental health issues. Lobotomies often only worked because they lessened the person's mental capacity altogether, stripping them of their ability to live the life they had before the procedure. Results of lobotomies varied, with true success stories lacking. Some patients died during the procedure, some committed suicide after, and others were left impaired. In a documentary I received from Ohio University directly regarding the ridges, a man tells this following story, which I'm going to put in my own words. Sorry guys, there's someone doing a tour of the ridges right over here because it's like almost Halloween and they're like doing a group tour with like staff, I guess. So this man is on this documentary and he tells this story like this. He worked at the ridges, okay, and they're all at this meeting with like a bunch of staff members. And the head guy of the meeting is sitting on the end of the table, right? And this girl comes in, like, after watching One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest over the weekend at the movie theater. And she's, like, extremely outraged that the Ridges would be performing lobotomies because in the movie, there's, like, a huge plot twist with lobotomies. She's really upset that they're letting people have this procedure done at the Ridges. And she's, like, going on about it, like, telling them, like, that it's disgusting and that it's like not something they should be doing. And she like finishes her story and the man at the end of the table like speaks up and is like, hey, like, I just want to let you know that I actually had a lobotomy. And so the whole story is that like this guy that's like the head honcho of this like meeting had a lobotomy and that he is still mentally capable enough to have some presence on this team. And I would like to say that I believe this story, but the way it was presented in the documentary was really condescending and almost like, oh, this girl didn't know what she was talking about, and this guy like spoke up and said something like to put her in her place. It's kind of the vibe of the story. But I'm not a medical professional, and I would say that my opinions are probably influenced by media, because I do watch a lot of media revolving around mental health and the way patients are treated in asylums. So that could be influencing my opinion of the story, and it could be true, it could be false. I'm not sure about that. So Ohio University's online archive shows that 39 lobotomies were performed in 1953 at the Athens Lunatic Asylum. A 1956 document explains that lobotomies were only used at the hospital after ECT, drugs, and therapy didn't do anything. So it was kind of used as like a last resort kind of thing. In 1956, 208 lobotomies were performed on 192 patients, with some of them getting multiple procedures done. In the document, the writer says that the mortality rate from lobotomies is 2 to 5%, but they don't give an actual percentage. Instead of writing how many people died during the lobotomies performed that year, the document only says, in the last 55 operations, we had 1 death due to fatal hemorrhage. Hydrotherapy, electroconvulsive therapy, and lobotomies were all performed at the Ridges campus in Athens, Ohio. I just want to take a little moment to say, think about that. The document doesn't give an actual percentage to how many people died during these procedures, doesn't say how many people died, and these are the documents that are publicly accessible. I'm not sure if there are documents giving the exact numbers, but from the perception that I got after speaking with people who work at Alden Library for Ohio University, those are the only documents we have, to my understanding. And we will never have an actual number of how many lobotomies were performed here, how many people died. And it just kind of shows you, back in the day, they disregarded mental health as an actual issue so much that these people often just became numbers and statistics, and they weren't even always recorded. Like, that's how insignificant they were to some people. And I also want to say, like I said, think about this, like, yes, these people were doing horrible things to other people, like shocking them in the head, like severing connections in their brains. But at the time, this was the forefront of medical research, and this is what the staff members believed would cure these people from their mental illnesses, because I would assume that most of the people working here at this campus knew that mental health was an actual health issue, and it wasn't a person issue, and it wasn't something to be embarrassed about. I personally believe that these medical professionals probably thought they could help these patients get back to their regular lives without thinking about the real consequences of what could happen if they severed someone's brain 20 years in the future, you know? They were really desperate to help these people and give them some care. So I don't personally think that every medical professional during this time was doing like these medical procedures just to hurt other people. I don't believe that, and I don't think that that will ever be the case in my mind. So it's like something you have to think about, discerning what really is true in the media and movies and what isn't. You know, not everyone is like Nurse Ratched, like in these mental hospitals. They were trying to help people all the time. This is sadly where we have the least information. After reaching out to Ohio University, they provided me with all of the information that they had on public record. Some files are yet to be released because they have to wait for years after the death of the person before their medical records can be publicly released. To my knowledge, there are no documents regarding any certain specific case or how any certain person was treated, or if they improved at the hospital. The only records held by Ohio University can be accessed on their digital archive, and this only includes intake papers from 1873 to 1911. Imagine what things are missing without the documents from 1911 to 1980, or the 80s or the 90s. Where are all those documents, you know? I'm sure a lot of them are held with like legal issues, but between 1911 to the 1950s and 60s, before mental health was a real public issue, I would assume that a lot of those documents just straight up don't exist because they did not record stuff like that. Like I was saying, they didn't chart anything. There is no coverage of actual lobotomy procedures on record, or at least made publicly accessible, meaning like this person had this lobotomy and it went this way. Like Jane Doe had this procedure in which we severed this connection at this time. There is not a document that I could find that is like that. I think this is just a good example of the stigma behind the mental health issues like I was saying before. Patients seem to not be regarded as people in any sense during all of this time. Still, some documents do have a little information about the grounds and the care of patients. Until the mid-1900s, it was legal for judges to commit people to asylums against their will. Families who didn't want to care for a mentally unhealthy person in their family would have sent them to the asylum in order to alleviate the pressure from their shoulders. These people would often not be acknowledged at the time of their death. It was extremely common for families to not claim the remains of people they turned into the hospital. After a body isn't claimed after death, the Athens Lunatic Asylum would bury the patients in the cemeteries on the grounds, but the patients were only given a headstone with a number on it. Some graves have been given a new headstone with the name of the person in the grave, but most headstones are still to this day just a number. They still aren't sure why they chose to use a numerical system instead of names for the graves on site, but some people think it was because they could order headstones in bulk and use only numbers, which would be cheaper and more streamlined than using names. There is a record book kept by Ohio University that connects the numbers on the gravestones to the names of the people who are buried in those graves. But most of the headstones today are still just numbers. This is another sad example of how patients were not regarded as people. Even to this day, to my knowledge, no one has come up with a way to really honor the people who died at this hospital. They haven't created new headstones for a replacement of the old ones, and they haven't created any monument, to my knowledge, to honor the people who died here without names on their graves. I watched another documentary provided by Ohio University that was a really good resource for honoring these people, as it took the real life stories of some of the patients and connected it to their number at the grave in order to eliminate the number and honor the person who's actually buried there. And think about that. Like, imagine you passing away from a mental health issue or a complication during surgery and being buried on site of the mental hospital, but only being given a name. So when your family does come to visit you, or someone does research later on and finds that you passed away here, they don't even know which grave is yours or if you are buried here or not without contacting Ohio University to get the name. How disgusting is that? Like, it's just so heartbreaking to me that someone who had to go through the mental health issues of their time wasn't regarded with any respect in their afterlife or given the peace of having their name put on a stone. So here's some of that information I was talking about that's more like hearsay or claims and not really something that can be proven by fact. And I want to say that also all of this information was prior to the 1960s. A document on the Ohio University archive claims that prior to the 1950s, most people working at the place did not take their job seriously. Long-term patients were served by caretakers rather than actual therapy and treatment. Another document says that the environment of the hospital was very strict and that patients lost their privileges if caught talking to someone of a different gender. There were no activities for the patients except physical labor working at the various places on the property. Most wards were locked and only certain patients were given access to leave their ward. Each patient had badges that would allow them to leave, but guards were often double-checking names because patients would switch their badges to get out of their ward temporarily. The number given on the document says that out of 40 to 50 patients in each ward, only 10 had privileges. Only 10 people could leave the ward out of 40 or 50. All patients wore the exact same outfit, probably used as some type of double whammy to strip them of their personal identity, but also maintain a certain look for the campus. Patients who were allowed to go into town were wearing outfits that were very apparent to townspeople as uniforms from the hospital. The hospital placed one worker on each ward, which contained about 40 to 50 people. So that's one person for every 40 to 50 people. Patients ate family style with a metal spoon and plate. It was common for fighting to break out at dinner. This OU article says, patients strapped to wooden benches, eating like animals, would take food from one another's plates. Attendants and aides did not have to have training to work at the facilities, which led to people who couldn't find a better job working at the hospital Some people only made $53 a month with 12-hour shifts. They did not chart anything except for narcotics, which is probably another reason why there aren't many articles regarding patient care or progress. The strong ward. In the OU document mentioned previously, it references a strong ward. The strong ward had 3 workers instead of 1. A lot of the patients in these wards were restrained to chairs or had wrist or ankle straps. If someone were in the strong ward, they would be in a room with straw piled up to the doorknob in the room. They would also be forced to sleep on straw beds. All of this was prior to the 1960s because the nation saw a drastic change in mental health care during the time. In the 1960s, drugs used to treat mental health issues became more effective, and people were taking notice of the inhumane ways in which people were being treated at these facilities. By the 1990s, the Athens Asylum had fallen into disrepair, along with many other Kirkbride-style hospitals. Mental health care as a whole transitioned from large units to small clinics, spread out and used to care for individuals. The desire for people at the asylum to work in smaller units motivated them to build a new property that they transitioned to that still operates today. Because the asylum was built on a reclusive hill, according to the Kirkbride plan, it allowed the facility to deteriorate out of sight and out of mind, just like many other Kirkbride-style facilities. A book about the Athens Lunatic Asylum says that it was changed to be called the Ridges during a 1984 naming contest. A land swap in 1993 gave ownership of the Ridges to Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. The office of the hospital was turned into an art museum, which is still operating today, and some buildings were turned into classroom halls. A notable change is that the building that was known as the suicide ward during the time of the hospital is now a center for research. Ohio University completed a 6-year renovation project of the Ridges in 2020 for buildings 13, 14, and 18. They allegedly spent more than $16 million, which led them to be the first university to repurpose an entire Kirkbride-style campus. They recently moved the Ohio University Police Station from the main campus to the Ridges, which is another reason not to vandalize the premises. So here is part 5 of this video, and it's going to be about hauntings at the Ridges. And I just want to say that all of these are hearsay, except for things I'm going to tell you that are fact. But from some of the interviews and the documentaries that you watch, a lot of people that work here say that they personally don't believe it's haunted. People that worked here when it was a hospital, I mean. They don't personally believe it was haunted or is haunted, but some people today say that they get a bad vibe when they go into the place. I've never actually been inside yet. I'm hoping that I'll get to visit the Kennedy Museum of Art soon and I can go inside and see if there's like an energy to it. But I just want to let you know that this is all hearsay. So the first person we're going to talk about is Margaret Schilling, and I just want to say, please, please, please listen to this story with love in your heart and not fascination of it being scary, because this is a real person we're talking about, and some people say that she was a really nice woman, and I just want to give that honor to her, like, say that her story was not in vain and that we learned something from this. So her name is Margaret Schilling. Margaret Schilling was a patient at the Ridges during the 1970s. In December of 1978, she went missing and was not found after multiple searches of the facility. Some people say she was playing hide and seek with some other patients under supervision and was not found after the fact. Some people say that she was a patient that was free to do whatever she wanted and that it was common for her to not return, so they assumed she would come back after not finding her. Either way, her body was found 42 days later, hidden away in an attic of the asylum that was closed off and hadn't been used for quite some time. Because of its lack of use, there was no heat being pumped into the room at the time. You have to think, this was during the time when the facility was dwindling down to a small part of being used. Like, the building that was once used as huge halls is now being used only in certain parts of the building. So they had begun to shut the heat off in certain parts of the building to save money and keep the place open. She was found in the room completely naked, with her clothes folded neatly on the windowsill of the room she was in. Because her body was there for 42 days, the decomposition of it left a human-shaped stain on the ground. The stain on the floor does in fact still remain there to this day, with this picture being taken in 2018, 40 years later. Personally, when I came to Ohio University, I did not believe that this was actually true, But this story actually did happen. She did pass away. She was found 42 days later in this place, and there is still a stain of her body there to this day. Her cause of death was determined to be heart failure, with the general consensus being that she took off her clothes to purposefully die of hypothermia in the cold room. Personally, I don't believe this at all. You're allowed to make your own conclusion, but I just want to say, how did she get to the room in the first place if it was something that was locked away from other people? I guess it would make sense if she was playing hide and seek, like she hid in this place that was far off from the rest of the campus. Some say the room was locked and that she would have needed a key to enter it. If that was the case or not, she was still neglected by the staff in some way as they didn't know where she went. And why did she take her own clothes off? Some people say she took them off in a last-minute chance to get some warmth from sunlight that was being cast into the room. The room she was in was surrounded by windows, so she definitely could have broken a window to get help or try to get people to notice her from the room. This is just my own personal opinion, but I don't think it was suicide in any form of it. No matter what happened to Margaret, we cannot romanticize her story. No matter the cause, Margaret still suffered at her time of death and was known as a lovely human being who was incredibly nice. People who have lived at the Ridges while working there have collectively said that they have never seen or felt her presence, even though the story is bone-chilling. It is important to honor her death and remember that she was in fact still a human being and not just a stain to be used as a spectacle. With that being said, it is important to know these stories because we have to learn from our past and not make the same mistakes again. I also want to say that they did a study in, I think, the 90s to see what the stain consisted of, if it was actually from her body. So the theory that they came up with was that the cleaning products are what actually stained the floor when they were cleaning up from her body being decomposed. And you can watch that video. I'll link it in the description below. Let me know in the comments, actually, what you think happened to Margaret. Just like if you have any ideas, let me know. I would love to hear it. There are also more general hauntings at the asylum, like people saying they have seen past patients at the hospitals roaming the grounds, but I personally have never seen anything, and most of the accounts of the people on documentaries that work there say that they've never seen anything either. Still, the asylum in Athens, Ohio holds a reputation for being an extremely haunted place. You can actually take tours of the Ridges during the Halloween season, which I was planning on doing this year, but I think it might be too late. The Ridges is an extremely interesting place, and it's one that holds a dear place in my heart. I am happy that Ohio University took the time to renovate at least some of the buildings, which proves to me that they're actually interested in maintaining the history of the Ridges. Even though it's nice to watch the place be renovated, I feel awful every time I really sit down and think about what the patients went through. People who are suffering mentally should never have to go through more suffering in a care facility. With that being said, a lot of the pain patients suffered only happened because doctors and nurses truly believed in the techniques at the time. They thought that what they were doing was best for patients, and it was the safest and fastest way to make them better again. The suffering these patients went through, small or large, can never be forgotten, so we can remember that we should always treat other people with compassion and respect in a way that is not condescending. It is crucial to help other people and lift them up, and not use another person's misfortune as a way to make yourself feel more powerful than them. I am asking you genuinely, if you watch this video, please do not visit the Ridges unless you will be driving through or going on a hike to respect the people who lost their lives in the facility. It is extremely interesting to learn about and honor these people, but it is insanely disrespectful when people vandalize or destroy the property of others. Whatever you do, do not trespass on the property, as it is a complete disrespect to the patients and history of the buildings and all of the work Ohio University has done to maintain it. Besides the disrespect, Ohio University's police station is in the middle of the property, so it would be a legal risk for you as well. The property is well maintained and no longer abandoned, so someone is bound to be there if you come here. With that being said, I just want to say thank you for listening to me in this history of the Ridges. If there's anything you've heard about the Ridges or a personal experience you've had, please let me know in the comments. I'm so interested. I would love to hear it. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a thumbs up or subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you here for future videos. I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video and being on my channel. I love you so much. Even if we've never met before, I love you. Thank you for watching this video. I've worked so hard on it. Really hope it can be factually representative of the Ridges and the people who lived here. After watching this video, take some time to be appreciative of the life you live and being mentally healthy if that's the case. I hope you have a happy Halloween and a happy weekend. And I love you. Thank you so much for being here. Cheers.